Boom, according to that I am live. Welcome, this is Tokyo Tonight. My name is Hiko Simon. Good to see you once again. Sorry for the short notice for the show tonight. Actually, well, two things. There hasn't been a lot of news this week, so I don't have a lot of topics. I know I've said that a lot of weeks lately, but I genuinely don't. So if you've got topics for me, feel free to ask for them today. And second, I do actually have to turn in early tonight, so I will plan to keep it short. We'll see how I go at that. Yeah, thanks for joining me. Good to see King of Kanto and Quint Ranked already in spite of like 30 seconds notice ahead of the show. So great to see you. 7 other concurrent viewers at the moment, so always good to see that. Remember to say hello. Remember also to say, if you add Mark Hiko Simon there in the comments, there will flash up orange, which will make it easier for me to notice. Also, sometimes if you've got something for me, this happened last week, point out if I scroll past it or I don't catch it when I go back, point out, just say, hey, you missed my comment, and I will go back, I will cover it. I don't miss comments intentionally. So yes, indeed, Mr. Kordychep, famous last words, but we'll see how I go. So yeah, good to see everybody. Hope that you are all well. Everywhere in the northern hemisphere right now, going into winter. Tokyo 503, good to see you. Is indeed getting into the third, fourth, whatever wave you are up to. With Japan, it's definitely a third wave. That's definitely happening. That's probably the main topic this week, actually. There's not been a lot of other news to talk about, but I will go into what else there is. Kay and Kodos, good to see you. And yes, indeed, you did make it in time. We all did. Yeah, as a New Zealand fan, I was watching New Zealand play Argentina at rugby yesterday, and Argentina beat us for the first time, although they've got a great rugby team that's beaten France, which can beat us all the time. So we always knew that they could do it. But really great to see them actually beat us. They played really well, and it's good for them, and it's good for us actually to get beaten every now and then. So that was a thing. Hey Aaron, good to see you. I'm just saying to everybody, give me topics. I really, seriously, I mean it this time, famous last words, but I do not have that many topics tonight, really, apart from the latest on the pandemic here, which there's not very much to say, but I'll say that. Paragotti, good to see you. After all these years, yes, you got the notifications. Yeah, the RGs indeed. King of Kanto, will I watch the SpaceX launch in the morning? I don't know what time it is, Japan time. They keep rescheduling it. It's supposed to be on the 15th in America. Yeah, I hope it goes well. I mean, I think it's just excellent to see private space companies basically outdoing NASA. Yeah, the fact that including a Japanese astronaut, one of the 4 astronauts going up to the space station, I believe. Well, I don't want to get it wrong, but yeah, it's a JAXA astronaut. And this is the thing, Japan, well, they have rockets and so on. They contribute a lot of science. They contribute a lot of satellites and equipment and so on, and they get dibs on a lot of astronauts. So that's actually great to see. The butter situation. There isn't a lot to report on the butter situation. There's been a steady supply lately, in spite of the obvious mismanagement by the government. So yeah, I'm going to dive in. But as always, in King of Kanto, if you want to ask me a question, I caught that. But just so that I don't miss it, if you add my Kiko Simon before it, it'll flash orange, and then I'll know, oh, someone's asking me something directly. It means I'm less likely to miss it. Satoshi Noguchi, indeed. So yeah, apparently the space station, the ISS, is going to be so crowded with the Dragon space capsule going up on this flight that, yeah, someone's going to have to sleep actually in the capsule attached to the station. But it's kind of cool, and it'll be really interesting, of course. We've got exciting couple of years ahead with the lunar space station and then the lunar missions happening in the next, 2 years. And the fact that that's probably going to be private missions, as well as, of course, the race to Mars at the moment. So, yeah, it's pretty cool. That's why I got the T-shirt. But Subaru the car. Yes, I will talk about the social... That's actually one of the very few topics I have tonight is the Social Democrats, well, separation or disintegration or whatever you want to call it. I mean, I only got a few sentences to say about it. Well, no, that's probably not going to prove to be true, but that is one of the only topics I have tonight. So yes, indeed, I'll be covering that Subaru the car, and good as always to see you there in the comments. Yeah, the King of Kanto, that's exactly how you do it. Paragotti, the R-chip trade agreement, I kind of thought about including that. They are planning to sign it tomorrow, minus India. Yeah, it's a big deal, but I don't really have an awful lot to say about it other than that I think it's a big thing. I mean, it's really what the TPP should be, but, America decided 4 years ago. And to be clear as well, it's not just that the current president of the United States, who was elected at that time decided to pull out of it, which was dumb. But, from my perspective, it was also driving me nuts that the Democrat candidate of the time, who actually negotiated and created the TPP, was campaigning against it because she realized it wasn't popular votes. And rather than try to explain it, she ran against it. But yeah, in spite of not having America participate, the TPP is going well. And RCEP is actually showing what you can do without that. And I think it's a shame that India's not on board. I'm kind of familiar with why they're not. They've got a long history of being screwed over by Britain and so on, taking advantage of international trade frameworks leveraged for their benefit, and they decide to look after their own first. And that's actually, given their history, an understandable position. But it's pretty big news, obviously, and I think it's great to be in Japan. And as good as a New Zealander with that. So yeah, it is big news, but there's not a lot else to say in terms of what's happening, other than I think that the Australian Prime Minister is actually flying up here to either sign it or talk about it. But yeah, it's pretty cool. Sergeant Bilko, excellent to see you. And everybody else. I think I've covered everybody. Remember, if you do rock in, we have 17 concurrent viewers. So 16. So rock in, say hello. Remember, do an @Mark Kiko Simon if you want to grab my attention, and let's just dive into the topics. I did mention earlier, by the way, I just got distracted by Subaru the Car's comment. Princess gossip with lawyer to be in US. I don't know exactly what you're talking about. Princess Mako-san and her marriage debacle. I don't think that's with a lawyer, or is that the story? Is Komuro going to be a lawyer in the US? Yeah, that whole thing's a mess. I didn't put that in on purpose, but just quickly to talk about that since you raised it. For those of you who don't know, if you want to see someone growing up from a country with the English royal family, who is also the queen of a bunch of other countries, including New Zealand, although she probably barely remembers that, and technically they're all German. But if you've seen The Crown on Netflix, it's well worth watching. As stupid as it sounds, you could probably make an equally interesting The Crown of the Japanese royal family. There are lots of dramas that go on with it. Really highlights the silliness of the whole thing, if you ask me. But yes, one of the princess, who is the, I believe, older sister of the next in line, or actually now he's second in line. So basically, if the current emperor dies, he's got a daughter. But under the Meiji really didn't like women. So when they restored the monarchy in Japan, he made the law so that women could not become empress. Basically, it had to be a male heir, which was a problem for the current emperor, who only has a daughter. There was talk about changing the law to allow women to become the empress of Japan, which would have made sense to the extent that having an emperor at all makes sense. However, just when they were about to create the laws for that, the emperor's younger brother had a baby boy. So the way that the succession has now been set up is that if the current emperor dies, rather than go to the next generation boy, go to the nephew, it'll actually go to the younger brother first, and then the younger brother's son. So they've set up succession like that. Kind of terrible maybe it's a good idea actually. I mean, who would want the job for Aiko-san, for the current princess? That third in line, the nephew, the male heir on the younger brother's side, his older sister, met a guy with a surname Komuro, which I find memorable because it reminds me of Tetsuya Komuro, the music producer from the 90s, who one of the richest guys in Japan, at least, that was officially paying taxes at that time. He also lost all the money, like a lot of people in music do, and is known as having a bit of a disaster of a personal life. Same name. This guy basically, there was this big kerfuffle that she was going to get married to this guy called Komuro. It turns out that her the prospective husband, however, his mum had a whole bunch of debts and was pressuring the Imperial Household Agency to pay her debts for her, and the Household Agency kind of put the whole thing on ice and clearly blocked the wedding, and they said that they would postpone it, seemingly, obviously, in the hope that they would just give up. They just gave some sort of announcement the other day. He's been away doing legal studies in the US, and she actually just did a little notice saying, hey, we're still going to get married, screw you guys. So yeah, that was kind of Interesting, but stupid at the same time, but interesting. So yes, thank you for the reminder about that, Subaru the car. We've got Christopher Luke, good to see you. Is the Japan government reacting to the recent infection and spikes? Well, I'll talk about that in a moment. Yes and no. They're kind of doing what they always did. They're talking that it's not, they're not really changing any of the dumb things that they're doing. But yeah, Ben Grant, good to see you. Good day indeed, Ben Grant. From Twitter, I believe. Good to see you in the chat. And yes, indeed. Odie Jr., boom, good to see you. Nesta125, good to see you. Also, I had a lot of fun playing Among Us with you the other night. Thank you for that introduction to that game. Of course, I was terrible at it. I think I lost every time I was the person. But yeah, that was still a lot of fun. Erin, she's indeed off the hook. That's how I look at it for Aiko-sama. Actually, it was kind of funny. I used to actually live in Shinanomachi, and she would walk to school at Gakushuin past like where my house was. Sometimes I've actually been walking the opposite direction on the street when she was walking to school. When she walks to school, by the way, she's got like an entourage of like 4 secret police, like with earpieces, as well as sort of cars following, but she was walking. But I've been on the footpath going the opposite way. It was a funny place to live. I also used to run into Taro Aso, the deputy prime minister, walking around when I was there. But anyway, that's other things. Screw you guys, Hiko 2020. That's a pretty good slogan that. Yeah, well, I must admit, I mean, the Crown on Netflix, whether you're for or against or whatever, it's brilliant, and it does, I think, as it should, portray the royal family in somewhat of a sympathetic light. At least you sort of get that. Yeah, that would suck. But I don't know what to feel. It's just so silly, isn't it? But anyway, let's get into it. I figured out a way to record tracks. I can't make it live like this, but what I do is I found a way to when I make some beat making tracks. When I create some loops, I've kind of been focusing on just improving my skills a little bit at making this in GarageBand iOS. And I must admit, I'm seriously tempted by Ableton 11 coming out now, and I am having a lot of fun using the old MPK that I've got right here, that I was actually playing just before we got on the show. It's kind of hard to hook up to show you really clearly what I'm doing on the screen, but I found quite a neat way to be able to record a screen capture and record overhead rather than using the webcam, which doesn't show great resolution, to actually use a proper camera overhead and take the 2 recorded videos and match them together and show me making the beat and cutting out all of the me looking for things and trying things out and just showing the bits that I found and putting it all together. It actually works pretty well, and it shows you pretty clearly how GarageBand is free if you've got an iPhone or an iPad, so you can actually, and you don't even need the keyboard to be able to do it. You can do it all within the app. The keyboard's just a nice interface, so you can actually see what I do and copy it if you like. This is how I make loops that I've put up on SoundCloud. I've actually enjoyed that. I found another tool to get a little bit better at the old finger drumming and stuff like that, so I can do even more. But I've put up a couple of videos of recording that way. It also allows me to record and get everything, and because I'm editing and I'm not doing it live like I was before, where I was doing these 10-minute videos, but they're taking 20 minutes. Now I can edit it, and it actually does get down to 8 minutes. And yeah, they came out pretty well, so check them out. They're on the Tokyo Digital Crew channel. I may, if I finish early, which I was thinking I would. I was thinking I'll get this whole thing done in 30 minutes today, but I'm still talking about the very first story, so we'll see how I go with that. The King of Kanto, is The Crown as good as Cuties? I have not seen Cuties. I've got no interest in Cuties. But The Crown is actually pretty good. I mean, and I'm not the sort of person, I wasn't attracted to the subject matter or anything like that, but it's pretty well done as drama. Cuties, I've just heard stuff about, and I do not want to watch it. But Erin, see, she knows what she's talking about. Listen to Erin, everyone. I've just heard terrible things about that. General Bumble Bumfire. I'm wearing a SpaceX t-shirt. I bet he thinks the Earth isn't flat. Well, I've heard rumors. I like to be even-handed about this whole thing. I think maybe it's not round, and maybe it's not flat. Maybe it's like a cube. Who knows? It could be many things. This is just fun. I just get into all the space news. So anyway, how is the government reacting to the third wave? In terms of the third wave, by the way, the first two waves, what really stood out about them was that outside of the big cities, in fact, really outside of Tokyo, there was like a huge spike in Tokyo. There were a couple of isolated spikes, one in Hokkaido very early on. And then, Osaka and Nagoya, the big cities, would have these big spikes. And then there were places like Iwate that were holding on for as long as possible with no cases. And it was pretty much that the waves that we had were very concentrated in the cities, and Tokyo was very much associated with danger to the rest of the country. There's been one real success of the Go-To Travel campaign that the government's been running as the second wave was winding down, basically paying subsidies for people from Tokyo and anywhere in the country to go and subsidize tourism all around the country to spur the economy, is that now we have the third wave starting. It's interesting what has been happening this week in terms of the numbers. Clearly, the total number of cases in the country is now, I think I've got a picture of it, you can see. It's clearly, boom, it's actually continued to go up there. So we are clearly now, it's a very clear third wave that Japan is into. However, if you look at the Tokyo data, which I don't have here, it is going up. We've just had 3 or 4 days in a row above 300 cases in Tokyo, which, for a prefecture of 14 million people, in Greater Tokyo being 32 million, the cases compared to other places, we're still doing okay. But, the daily 7-day average is sort of creeping from about 250, which is where it was, sort of in the bottom of that curve. It's been going up slightly to lately about 330, 340. We had a day with 390 the other day, so it's clearly going up in Tokyo, but it's not quite as pronounced as the total number, and that's because what's different about this wave is that the wave is genuinely being shared now. The numbers, particularly in Hokkaido, are super alarming, actually. They have a population like a quarter that of Tokyo, and they've got comparable numbers. They've had like 260, 270 every day. So, hey, Andrea Mobway, good to see you. They've got and it seems to correlate to, there are record cases happening in Iwate and in the north of Japan and places like Aomori, and they're running out of hospital beds up there already, even though the numbers are quite low compared to the US and Europe and so on. What seems to be characteristic this time is that the numbers are all going up sort of evenly across the country now, not just concentrated in the big cities, which I suppose, if there's been a predictable result of the Go-To Travel campaign, it's that. So look, the government is talking about Tokyo, by the way, but weeks before this was even a clear trend, Tokyo was talking about raising the testing capacity within Tokyo from 10,000 to 60,000 tests per day. So they've been getting ready, expecting this to happen. There are also, of course, better tests coming out, which can be done in a couple of hours as opposed to have to waiting for 3 days like we've been doing. So they've been kind of slowly preparing, but that said, already there are like a number of prefectures, including Tokyo, that are kind of on the brink of manageable hospital bed numbers. And these numbers, like compared to Europe and America, are not high. So, it could still go pretty badly. And there are a number of prefectures now. Before it was really all Tokyo. And the question before was other prefectures didn't want to take patients from Tokyo. So they didn't want to risk spreading it. But now a bunch of prefectures are kind of sharing the issue. So if that was the goal of the government, they've done a great job. The Minister for the Pandemic, who's also the Minister for Economic Revitalization, Nishimura, he's gone on the same thing where when journalists were asking, are we going to see lockdowns that are resumption of state of emergency? He said, no, it's really up to people to decide for themselves how to react. And then he got criticized for it. So he said, of course, we want people to wear masks, but, as appropriate. So the approach in Japan still seems to be the same, of basically asking people not to be stupid, which actually, it hasn't quite worked out the way it has worked out in New Zealand and Australia, where they did hard lockdowns and they got to 0 cases, albeit they're going into summer down there. But, it's been better. People seem to take care with the with being responsible and at least trying to, the numbers have not exploded here, which implies a good degree of people, washing their hands and social distancing and whatnot. But the government still seems to be relying pretty much on that. The Minister of Land, Infrastructure and Transport, that guy, he's the guy who runs the tourism agency is underneath that ministry, and they asked, which is running the Go-To campaign, the subsidized tourism. And given that Hokkaido has like an infection rate like 4 times that of Tokyo in terms of the population right now, they asked, are you going to exclude Hokkaido from the Go To Travel campaign? And both him and the Minister for the Pandemic said, this is not the time to be excluding people from our Go To Travel campaign, which, is a bit funny. It's kind of like, isn't this exactly the time? So it seems as before that everything in Japan is getting worse, but it's kind of not being as bad as it could be in spite of the best efforts of the government, perhaps more than the obvious efforts. At least I know that the government is doing a lot of things kind of quietly, but there are some other silliness which I'll talk to a bit later as well regarding the Olympics, where it seems like they're almost trying to do it as badly as possible on purpose. I see that we have the J-Vlog rocking into the comments. Good to see you, the J-Vlog. Welcome to the chat. And Tech Art too, good to see you, and good to see everybody else. Andrea Morboy, having a good time there in Melbourne and regional Victoria now. Woohoo, indeed, congratulations. You guys had a really tough time with the really heavy lockdown down there, but you got 0 cases. So it's great that it shows it can be done. And very good if you're in Australia or New Zealand right now, and a number of other countries like Taiwan. And so on. I don't know if they're still at 0, but a number of countries have been successful, and credit to you guys for because you actually did it the hard way. You put all the work in and you got it. So yeah, good stuff, Australia. Tawaiwai, excellent to see you. And Shivas, good to see you from Panama. Good to have our Panama resident in the chat. As I've said to everybody, I don't have a lot of topics tonight. I am planning to keep it short. We'll see how I go. But that's with the pandemic anyway. We are definitely in a third wave. Hoping that doesn't spike up, hoping that graph kind of does what it did last time, but there's no reason to think so. What's really worrying is that the 4 times the rate of Tokyo, i.e. if it becomes in Tokyo like it is in Hokkaido, we'll have 1,200 cases a day. That is, it seems to be correlating with where winter is coming in, like really being felt. It still is sunny and not too cold here in Tokyo. It really feels like autumn, and we have a great autumn here in Tokyo. But when it gets to real coldness, right now, all the coldest prefectures at the top of the country, they are all getting spikes in cases. So it seems to really correlate. So get your flu shots if you're in Japan, and take good care, and don't think that the government's going to bail you out, and not expecting a lockdown. So, it requires us to all be careful again. Squirrel, did I do that? I probably did that. And yeah, Andrea Morboy, very, very glad to hear as well. 16 days of 0, so yeah, that's well earned. Other news, Toshiba, which makes all kinds of things. They make computer screens, computers, mobile phones, nuclear power plants, all kinds of appliances, and so on. They do make power plants, and they also make, I believe, a lot of the coal-fired power plants, which have been used to replace all the shutdown nuclear power in Japan. Remembering that nuclear power made up about 20 to 30% of Japan's generation before the Fukushima accident. So yeah, they've actually they're kind of making a big commitment to doubling down on. They are definitely going to keep working on nuclear plants, but they are also going to make sure their other business going forward is not going to be coal-fired power plants. Now they say coal-fired, so I don't think they're going totally fossil-free. They could be making natural gas and oil and other types, but yeah, it's good to see. It's a good signal from them, given that Japan has been using a lot of coal to replace. I mean, even the environment minister, like a week ago, was talking about how coal is necessary to. It kind of is. It's actually. I know it's simple. It doesn't sound right to say that you can have some fossil fuel generation. In order to have certain types of power, of course, getting rid of the fossil fuels should be an end technical goal. But at the moment, if you want to have a lot of wind power or a lot of solar or something like that, you've got to have basically something like coal or oil-powered power plants to offset the instability. You've got to have something there on tap that you can adjust as quickly as wind changes. And right now, that's the best and only source for that. And they're making better sort of solutions for it with batteries and storage to be able to offset at the sites. But you need a little bit of it, but the idea of actually having it as and a lot of news at the moment talking about how climate change is going. I was reading an article the other day that, frankly, even if we just stopped all fossil fuel emissions today, we're now at a point now where global warming has now just advanced to a point that we're seeing in places like Russia and Greenland and so on, that permafrost is now defrosting, and all the methane from all of the rotten leaves and organic material that's been frozen in the soil for like thousands of years and aggregating is now decomposing. It's causing all of course all these explosions and craters all over Siberia. but it means it's actually creating as much emissions now as people put out, but it's been triggered by us warming things up to a point that now it's created this circle which we can't really reverse at this point. It's actually the start of runaway greenhouse, the greenhouse effect. And so there's talk that even if we get to, and we know we're close to being zero emissions, a lot of countries are now belatedly setting goals that we should have set and stuck to 20 years ago. Yeah, they're talking about things like, we're going to have to actually look at things like sequestering and geoengineering to be able to reverse what we have right now. It's going to affect us, but it's definitely going to affect generations after us more. So it's a big concern. Yeah, Toshiba, I mean, it is good to see just in the last couple of years that a lot of companies who should have really, again, been saying all this stuff 20 years ago and have been quiet for too long, but they're saying the right things now, and I appreciate that. We need a squirrel to keep Hiko Simon talking, says Aaron. Population density, Tokyo versus Hokkaido. I'm sure someone can Google it, but I believe the numbers right now in Hokkaido correspond to it's roughly 4 times. Maybe a little bit less than. I think Hokkaido is like 4 million or 5 million, and Tokyo is 14 million, but it works out that the rate would be over 1,000 in Tokyo anyway. And bedtime for Andrea, so good night there. Have a good one. Sachifa, good to see you. Or a shit ton of batteries. No, that's absolutely, it's right. But there are problems with batteries, apart from the fact they're ecologically nasty to extract, and they have a limited life. You're actually better off with solutions like fuel cells, which you can just keep refueling and using forever if you can get enough hydrogen, which you can't really get very easily on Earth. Or mechanical batteries, things like actually using it to pump water into a well and then release all the water. There are solutions like that people have been using for hundreds of years, but yeah, batteries are pretty good. Anyway, the J-Vlog, butter, however, Osechi, New Year gift boxes are cheap this year. Side bonus, perhaps indeed. Anyway, that's the third wave. Yeah, this is, you talk about what is the government doing about the third wave. Here's some crazy stuff. The Tokyo, not the national government, but the Tokyo Olympic Organizing Committee held a big press conference this week. Right now, actually, Bach, what's his first name? The head of the International Olympic Committee actually just arrived in Tokyo today, flying on a private jet. So he's not caring about global warming at all. I mean, seriously, given how much the Olympics are already running over cost, that guy should be flying economy. And given that he was met directly on the tarmac at Narita or wherever he flew in by officials waiting to meet him, obviously he's not going to have to do the 14-day quarantine either. But he arrived. But in preparation for that, people from Tokyo are talking about, a spokesperson for the Tokyo Olympic Organizing Committee did a press conference sort of saying that they've all agreed it's not going to make sense for, all the visitors who have tickets already purchased from overseas to watch Olympic events are not going to, to expect them all to be in 14-day quarantine when they come into the country isn't really practical. I mean, it's just not going to make sense. Also, the prohibition for tourists coming into the country from using public transport, that's just not going to work either. So we really want the government to create an exception when the Olympics happen, that to allow all people coming for the Olympics to be able to come in and skip the quarantine process and to be able to go straight onto public transport, please. So it's kind of crazy to me. I mean, apart from the fact that that is in itself just objectively crazy. I mean, clearly, even if they release a vaccine right now, it's not going to be spread enough within Japan, let alone every other country in the world where people are coming from, to be, in effect next year. After all this fuss that they would not allow people like myself, like permanent residents who have lived in Japan and pay taxes here and, lived all our lives here and so on, and they wouldn't allow us to return to the country for like 6 or 7 months. And then created all of these conditions for us to come back. Yet, if you have a rhythmic gymnastics ticket, they're gonna all of a sudden now it's a national priority to let those people come in to go and use their Olympics ticket. It's kind of nuts. I've been paying taxes here for 22 years, and if I was outside of the country when they introduced the travel restrictions on foreign citizens, I would have been screwed. And a lot of people, 88,000 people, were screwed. And in terms of revenue for the Tokyo government, I bet you those foreign residents and permanent residents accounted for a lot more revenue than they're going to get from those Olympics tickets. So apart from the hypocrisy and tone deafness of it, it's also obviously just objectively stupid. And this is where it's coming in now. I saw on Twitter Jake Adelstein was talking about perhaps the Buck is coming in to consider, having a talk about actually cancelling the Olympics. And maybe, I don't know, maybe there was something going on with that statement of waiving the whole quarantine process for all visitors as like a Hail Mary to say something that was obviously going to be shut down by the government on purpose. And then as an excuse for giving up. I think it could just be Thomas Buck. Thank you for the correction to YY. It could be that they're just trying to come up with the rationalization that they have to cancel the Olympics. Or, the other thing which is being discussed is that right now the next two Olympics are already decided, the 2024 and 2028. I don't remember where. But 2032 is the next Open Olympics, and there are some people saying already that perhaps they should just cut their losses and give the 2032 Olympics to Tokyo instead, which I think is a reasonable solution at this point. It feels like it's just going to be such a mess next year and bad for the participants and bad for Tokyo, and there are more important things right now. Bad luck for Tokyo having two Olympics cancelled. But obviously, I don't think anybody thinks it's a good idea for it to go forward right now, so we'll see what happens. To YY indeed, put him at the back of the plane. Make him go through the quarantine and see. If everybody coming to the Olympics could come in like Thomas Bach did, I'm pretty sure that they'd sell all the tickets, but we'd be paying for it for the rest of our lives. And hell, I don't know, maybe they should just exempt permanent residents from taxes. So, as you can see, experts are worried, but when they talk about high alert, the government's saying, everybody, you should be on high alert. We're not going to do anything. We're just going to actually pay people money to make it worse. But you should all be on high alert. So, thanks for that. That seems to be the message. So, yes. I see Mr. Cordy Chip saying something that I don't understand, so I'm going to try to look away. Uniqlo. I don't understand anything about this, but apparently, in spite of the third wave happening, whenever they show this stuff in America, Japanese like to make some nasty Japanese people like to point out, or if you see scenes like this in China or America, and they say, that's the Mindo, that's just the low cultural level of those countries, kind of bragging that they have superior culture. However, apparently they released these Jill Sanders. I don't know. The only Sanders I know is the chicken, but apparently they've got some collection of clothes that are from Uniqlo, so they all probably cost like $5 each. But apparently, in spite of the third wave coming in, the shops were so packed that you had broken glass, mirrors broken, mannequins dismantled. This was particularly in Nagoya, by the looks of it. Which, if you've seen and heard about the way that they drive down there, is Toyota City. It sounds like it was a Nagoya traffic jam down inside the shop. The idea that you even have people lining up like that and going into such a frenzy in the shops is ridiculous. But that's a thing that happened. So, this idea that Japanese are like obedient and, well-behaved and common sense. No, they're human beings, just the same as everybody else. And that was stupid. And yes, by popular request, Shaminto, the Social Democrats, voted to dissolve themselves, but then immediately half the party voted to not dissolve. So maybe a quick talk about this. Before I get into this, the J-Vlog, do I get the daily megaphone alerts? We get them announced twice a day, 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. from the city. Yeah, I get line alerts at about 3 p.m. every day with the daily total. I don't get them in the morning, but I get the daily numbers, and it's a routine to see, and you start to get a sense. I also really appreciate following Geroid Reedy on Twitter. He's diligently, all the way back since like February or March, when I used to try to be the first to put out the alerts every day, he was always pretty much the first person, and he stuck to it. And he's got quite a good system where he puts out the 7-day average and all the actual data the moment it's released from the Tokyo government. But of course, I get it online at the same time as everybody else does. So I do get that. So anyway, the Social Democrats, they are basically the successor party of the Socialist Party in Japan. So quick background to this. Japan back in the after World War II, when Japan sort of had its founding democracy, really under the time of MacArthur, there've always been kind of, floating different parties around, but essentially the country was overwhelmingly socialist and anti-right wing after World War II. Partly, there was a lot of resentment at the right-wing government that had gotten Japan into the war, and recognition of abuse of workers and so on. And the country very, very nearly in the 1950s became communist. And in fact, it became such a close thing that MacArthur and the CIA at that time realized this was a problem, and they let all the Japanese government officials out of jail and gave them a whole bunch of campaigning money and helped them run and establish the LDP. So basically the Conservative Party was set up by the Americans and bolstered by the Americans who were afraid that Japan was going to democratically choose to become pro-North Korea and pro-Russia and pro-China with the Korean War starting. Basically the leftist movement in Japan, which was enormous for a long time, was represented mainly by two parties. There was the Japan Communist Party and the Japan Socialist Party. The Communist Party was actually, although I think it originally started out as being affiliated with the Soviet Union and China, they quickly kind of broke off that, and they just became their own kind of version of communism and their own interpretation. And their main platform was that they were against the security treaty with the US, which they recognized had actually undermined democracy to a degree in Japan, because the Americans had kind of intervened to kind of try to make sure that they would never be in power. And particularly the security treaty, they thought that Japan should go back to being a neutral status and not get dragged into America's wars, which they thought would happen with the security treaty. The Socialist Party, however, so you'd always think in most countries, if there's a communist party, the Socialist Party, the Socialist Party would maybe be the center-left party, and the communist would be like the far-left party. It wasn't really like that with Japan. The Socialist Party of Japan was actually affiliated with the North Korean Workers' Party, which was also, there's obviously a big, it's partly just a name issue, the difference between the communist and the socialist parties. But the Socialist Party was, if anything, more militant than the Communist Party. They were more affiliated when the Communist Party disowned links with mainland communist parties. The Socialists maintained links with North Korea right up through the late 1980s as a sister party. They would do parliamentary exchanges and so on. And in fact, as far as the late 1980s, the party of the leader of that party, which had a lot of seats in parliament, they were a bit like the British Labour Party or the sort of, the Democrats are actually, not really comparable to the kind of left-wing politics in most democracies. But, pretty much like a Labour Party in the UK or Australia or New Zealand, the Socialists kind of occupied that place. Yet the leader of that party, as late as 1988, described North Korea as a paradise on earth that Japan should be trying to emulate. Many people actually from governments in even the 2000s, Naoto Kan, for example, he joined that party when it had the leader who thought that North Korea was what Japan should be. They were very far left, but also electorally very successful. In fact, they were often, the only thing that really stopped them from kicking out the LDP earlier was that their votes would be split with the communists, who were also very, very successful. The whole Japanese sort of, this is an oversimplification, but for a long time, politics in Japan was really split between two or three parties, and two of them were left-wing, and the other one was the LDP. The whole student riots and everything in the 60s, the anti-Vietnam movement and so on, the the Japan Red Army and so on, these were people from the Japanese far left, and where those people went mainstream and started running for seats, they would always run for the socialists or the communists. And they did quite well, and there are cities in Japan, large cities, Hiroshima, Okinawa, places like that are strongholds of Yokohama for a long time, and Tokyo. The urban centers were particularly good for the leftist parties, and the Socialist Party for a long time. Tokyo, I believe, and Yokohama were a long time Socialist Party strongholds. So you're talking about a party that was really the closest thing in terms of electoral position to the Democrats in Japan, in spite of the fact they were clearly quite out there and clueless in many respects about their international relationships. The abduction issue did a lot of... so basically what happened during the 1990s, the Socialists, by the way, did form a coalition with some people who jumped out of the LDP. When people in the LDP realized in the 1990s that the LDP was going to lose, when the bubble collapsed and the whole country was falling apart, some young Turks within the LDP realized that there was a chance to set up like a centrist party that could cash in on all the discomfort, on all the discontent with the LDP, and capture those votes of people who couldn't vote for the socialists or the communists, but wanted the LDP out of power. And they set up like the Democrats in Japan, and they teamed up with the socialists to actually kick the LDP out for the first time in 1995. And was it Murayama? There was a socialist party prime minister for a time in 1995. So that was sort of the peak of their powers at that time. They actually made it into government finally at one point. However, that sort of set off the cycle of every time the Democrats got into power, or any opposition, it was always a coalition of opposition parties. There would always be so much hope that they would come in and fix all the problems with Japan. And some of them would try, but what would always sort of happen is that they would fail, and they would fail miserably. And it's happened in the last government as well, mainly because, of course, the bureaucracy is invested. They've got a cozy relationship with the LDP, which lets them do whatever they like and so on, and they just stopped cooperating with the government. They wouldn't implement policy, they wouldn't do anything with them, and of course they're connected with the media, so they would get the media to sort of run stories on everything that they're doing wrong and make them look incompetent. And basically every time that the LDP's fallen and someone else has taken over, it's kind of backfired on the parties that took over. It happened again with the Democrats in the last time, that they ended up, basically causing such disillusionment that the LDP is still in government now, but it's just based purely on the disillusionment with how badly the Democrats did. The Democrats of the 2000s, after the collapse of the Socialists, they were still holding on into the early 2000s. They reformed as the Social Democratic Party to sort of, make them appear more mainstream than the Socialists. But what really crushed them was the North Korean abductee. They always basically considered the abductee victim families puppets, or basically right-wing people sort of making up lies about North Korea to discredit socialism. And they would always, even though they had connections with North Korea that they could have used to pressure North Korea to release the abductees, they always said, no, you're liars and this is all made up. So when North Korea said, okay, actually we had abductees and here they are, we're giving them back now, when that happened, that basically destroyed the Social Democrat Party then. They had like 20-30 people in Parliament, and most of the party quit. Most of the members stopped paying fees, and a lot of the people who were in the party who realized it was so toxic they couldn't be seen with it, they joined the Democrats. And since then they've been basically polling in the margin of error, 3% or below, ever since the early 2000s. They've been from being the second biggest sort of party in Parliament. The last few years have had 4 people in Parliament. And this week at their national conference, it was funny just seeing the images of the national conference. Pretty much everybody in the auditorium, the very spaced out auditorium, was like over 80 years old. Basically everyone who shows up there still, and the 4 members are there probably as legacies from having won the seats a long time ago. They voted to basically dissolve the party and to merge in with the Democrats, or the constitutional Democrats that have taken over from the Democratic Party, to have a unified single opposition. They don't see the point in carrying on in a party of 4 people that no one supports. However, that person, Fukushima, former head of the Social Democrat Party, after everybody voted that, okay, we are all going to go and move over to the Democrats and dissolve the party, she said, yeah, I'm not going to go with you guys. I'm going to set up a new Social Democrat Party, and we're going to revive the whole Social Democrat movement all over again. So now she's just down to 1. The other 3 are leaving, and they've sort of told that the whole party voted by majority to dissolve the party, but a few people have decided to hold out and keep fighting the fight, which... and look, she speaks up and says the right thing on issues. It's the great thing about not having any hope of ever being in government or having any real power, is that you can just speak clearly and point out wrongs and so on that should be fixed. But the party is a relic now, pretty much. It's a lot of very old politics and old views, and it's tainted by its history, even though the people in it are not necessarily bad people. And many of the people from that party have gone into the Democrats and the other current mainstream parties, and they've been quite successful. But the existence of this party and working with this party, when the Democrats do electoral cooperation with the communists and the socialists, that's all that the LDP has to point out. They say, look at the Democrats, they're not really, you think that they're a mainstream center-left party, but they're not. They're doing deals with the far-left parties, that North Korean-friendly party, the Social Democrats, where, you see their members and they all still think that North Korea was right. And you want to vote for the person who teams up with them. It's bad for the Democrats, and it's bad for everybody else, and it plays into the LDP's hands. So to that extent, I guess the challenge is that while they realize that they undermine the electability of the Democrats, at the same time their politics is still, they're not giving up their politics, and why should they? But it's not really electable anymore. So yeah, and then there was one basically. Most NHK polls, they're down to like 0.3% or 0.1% support. I mean, basically well below the margin of error now. Clearly, there are some people who are just going to vote for them until they die. But when those people die, which will probably be soon, looking because their voter base now looks pretty elderly and from the student radical movement from the 60s. So there will be people basically 60 or 70 or above. Yeah, there's not a lot of young people, not a lot of reason for young people to really support anyone in the party. I mean, you know, they say good things about some issues, but yeah, their credibility's gone. And they're going. So yeah, that's the story with the Democrats. They're the Social Democrats. They're disappearing. The J vlog. Yep, the Niigata boats to NK full of cash, and the intrusions were a huge scandal. I mean, the abductions, and the fact that they were defending it for. And look, part of what they were defending, yes, they were defending North Korea as a utopian kibbutz of some sort that they thought, you know, Japan should emulate. And North Korea actually, for a time, you know, actually did have a better economy than the South, remember. You know, for a time it looked like they were going to make it work. But all of the Japanese, many members and supporters of the Socialist Party who moved to North Korea to support the birth of the country over there, many of them have escaped the country back and talked about how everything went so wrong over there. But at the same time, the other part of it is that there are so many Koreans left behind in Japan, and you know, these were the people who were the ones who spoke up and represented those disenfranchised communities of South Koreans and particularly North Koreans who still live in Japan today, and you know, have got the bad end of the stick on everything, and they've stood up for those sort of people as well. So you know. Idealist in a way, but they're again a bit like the Communist Party. They're tainted that among their old activist membership are people, for example, from the Japanese Red Army, like terrorists, people who have actually killed people and bombed people back when they thought bombs and killing people was legitimate when justified by idealism back in the 60s, but that still, you know, sort of taints their politics today. Christopher Luke, does the ruling party in Japan have a majority? After the last election, I believe they're just short of a majority because Japan is a proportional representation system. It's not like America where every seat is a runoff, which means that you just end up with two parties. You actually get, if you vote for a party, the final composition of parliament is based on the ratio of those parties. So right now, I think that they can almost get away with ruling without Komeito, the party that they rule with. They have a kind of a Buddhist religious group, although they're not supposed to be affiliated with religion, so they claim not to be affiliated, but they are called Komeito, that helps them keep up the numbers in parliament, and they give them a few seats, you know, for key positions in government in exchange for that. But they're pretty close to an absolute majority, which is really rare in proportional representation systems. I think New Zealand actually just had that for the first time, since we have a very similar system in New Zealand to Japan with a proportional representation system. And again, the government in New Zealand just got re-elected and for the first time got an absolute majority, which we never thought we'd see again. So yeah, normally you've got to team up with a couple of small parties, but right now they're pretty close, and it's as much to do with parties like this just having no credibility as it is to do with people wanting the stability, I suppose, of the national government. And that's all the topics that I have tonight. That's it. I told you I did not have a lot. I thought it would actually be 20 minutes shorter than it is. I suppose I could make a tune to leave, but you know what, actually I did say I do have to actually wrap up early tonight. I've got an early start tomorrow, so I'm going to wrap it up there. I'll look out for more videos. Check out the Tokyo Digital Crew channel and subscribe to it. I am making actually better quality, shorter, well-edited videos showing how I make stuff, and yeah, they're pretty cool. Of course, all my music, by the way, you can go to Hiko Simon on SoundCloud. Everything there is reusable, so if you ever want a loop to put on the background for a video or a video game, or you just want some music for something, it's all licensed that you can download it and use it yourselves, so check that out. And yeah, have a good week, everybody. Bitcoin Billionaire, there's a handle I don't recognize, but good to see you. And yeah, short one tonight, but shorty but a goodie, I hope you enjoyed the show. Thanks again, Setsuna, good to see you, by the way. And have a good week, everybody. Stay safe, of course, especially if you are in Japan or in the Northern Hemisphere. That the third wave is a doozy. and I expect we're going to see it all the way through to next summer. So yeah. I'm sorry, distracted by the I'm going to wrap it up there anyway. So good to see you all. Have a good week. Stay safe. Remember, you can follow me on Twitter. And peace, everybody. Boom. Maybe someone didn't like me talking about the Socialist Party, but that's okay. But if you did remember to like. It helps. And have a good week, everybody. Peace. Boom.